Chapter 2. A Gift. The Gift. The next night, his birthday, Nick stood inside the red velvet and tarnished gold lobby of the Pendragon Hotel and Casino, hands in his pockets, waiting for his grandfather. Finally, Nick spied him walking across the lobby's worn carpeting, a big smile on his face. "Waiting long, birthday boy?" he asked Nick, giving him a hug. "No. Where are we going to eat?" "I'm starving." In fact, he thought he might just die if he didn't get a cheeseburger soon. "You're always starving. I don't know where you put it all. Anyway, I can't tell you where we're going. It's a surprise, but we're already late." He practically dragged Nick along as they hurried out of the casino and climbed into Grandpa's car. Grandpa drove the biggest purple Cadillac convertible in Las Vegas, complete with fuzzy purple dice hanging from the rearview mirror. Nick supposed that it was the biggest purple Cadillac in the world, actually, as he didn't imagine there were many people willing to drive around in something so unbelievable, horrifically embarrassing. "And where did you say we were going?" Nick asked as they pulled away and snaked through the streets of Las Vegas. "Do you honestly think I'm going to fall for that? Can't trick me. I'm not that old." "A surprise, I told you," Grandpa said, his white handlebar mustache wiggling with pent-up amusement. Nick stared up at the neon lights of the city. Bulbs danced in synchronized staccato, advertising casinos, hotels, and Las Vegas's most spectacular shows, including the most famous of them all, the magician Damien. Tickets were sold out 3 years in advance, and they were so expensive that Nick figured there was no chance he'd ever see the show, much as he wanted to. A steamy June breeze ruffled his hair, which his father was always nagging him to cut. As they left the city, they were headed into the desert. Nick stared out at the expanse of nothingness, just dust and sand and highway. He looked at himself in the side view mirror. He was tall for his age and thin, with dark brown, wavy hair that hit the collar of his shirt. He had freckles scattered across the bridge of his nose, leading like a crooked path to his pale blue eyes. Those eyes were the same color as Grandpa's, which were the same color as Nick's mother's, who died when Nick was a baby. Grandpa drove on and on in the desert until Las Vegas was nothing more than a glowing speck far behind them. Nick stared up at the sky, which was blanketed with stars. The farther they drove, the smaller and more alone Nick felt, even though Grandpa was right beside him. Eventually, they reached a side road and turned left. There was no sign. "Are you sure you know where you're going?" "Absolutely, Nicky," Grandpa replied. His round belly, which resembled a department store Santa's, nearly touched the steering wheel. Up ahead, a wooden house stood lonely beneath a hollow moon. When they drove closer, he realized it was actually a store of some sort. Grandpa pulled up in front of it. "Here we are," Grandpa said as he put the car in park and looked over at Nick. "Come on then, we're late." Nick peered through the windshield at the sign on the door. "Madame Bogdanovich's Magical Curiosity Shop? She's expecting us." Nick clambered out of Grandpa's purple monstrosity and walked up the steps, Grandpa behind him. How the heck would anyone find this place if they wanted to buy something? This has to be the least successful magic shop ever. Nick peered in the window, but all he saw were shadows. He loved learning magic tricks, but his father hated it. Even though his dad was a magician, he always said he wanted Nick to become something, anything else. Grandpa reached the top step, and Nick opened the door. A bell gently chimed. "Just 1 minute," a high voice, almost like an opera singer's sang out to them. From behind a curtain that jangled with beads, an old woman emerged with makeup decorating her eyes that made them look like two butterfly wings and a deep purple and green scarf around her wild gray curly hair. Gold bracelets clinked, crowding her arms from her wrists to her elbows. She wore a long green velvet ball gown and what looked like an enormous emerald necklace that seemed to glow. "Gustav," she purred at Nick's grandfather. "You've brought him." He nodded. "Nick, allow me to present Madame B." "Hi." Nick lifted his hand in an awkward wave. He looked around the shop, which was mind-bogglingly crowded. A jumble of colorful scarves, hoops and rings, satin boxes, books on magic, top hats, wands, costumes, capes, and mannequins. Crystal balls competed with mason jars that had labels handwritten in a spidery script. Bat liver, ground Siberian caribou antler, condensed whale milk. Nick tried to avoid staring. "Come," Madame B commanded. She glanced over her shoulder at Nick's grandfather. "He's handsome, with those eyes just like his mama." Looking back at Nick, she said, "Happy birthday, my darling." "Thanks." Nick tried to look over his own shoulder at Grandpa. He wanted to ask, "Who is this crazy person?" But he was quickly whisked behind a dark curtain and half pushed into a huge velvet chair. Nick felt as though he had sunk almost to the floor. Grandpa ducked through the curtain, too. He and Madame B sat on the other side of a small, round table covered with the blood-red Satan tablecloth. Grandpa's and Madame B's chairs weren't quite as squishy as Nick's, so they seemed to sit up much higher than he did, peering down at him like a specimen under a microscope. Nick squirmed. Madame B reached into a large black leather bag and pulled out a crystal ball the size of an ostrich egg. She set it on a brass pedestal engraved with hieroglyphics. "Look," Madame B commanded, drawing out the word with an exotic accent when she spoke. She tapped a long, red, varnished nail against the crystal ball. "Tell us what you see." "Well, I can't," sputtered Nick, thinking this had to be the strangest birthday ever, which Grandpa was saying a law. "I don't know how." "Shh," the old woman hissed. "You can. Look, look." Nick stared meaningfully at Grandpa. They had to be kidding him. His father always said, in a town full of showgirls and oddballs, some of them were out of central casting, meaning Madame B probably thought she was in a movie. But more likely, she was just crazy. "Try, Nick," Grandpa urged. "For me." Sighing and fidgeting in his seat, Nick rolled his eyes, then leaned forward as best he could in the chair to stare at the crystal ball. All he saw was his own face reflected back, distorted, while Grandpa and the crazy magic shop owner seemed to look back at him with pin-dot heads showing through the other side, as if he was watching them through funhouse glass. "I don't see anything. There, you happy?" He flopped back in his chair. "No." The old woman batted her long caterpillar-like lashes. She looked at Grandpa and snapped, "Gustav, I hope you are right about this one." "Trust me," he said. Nick exhaled loudly. He hated when grown-ups talked about him when he was right there. Right about what? "Look," Madame B said. "You must breathe deeply, like this." She took a big breath. "Then you look with your mind, not your eyes." "Easy." She snapped her fingers. "I used to gaze in it for the Tsarina." It's a good ball. Try it. Feeling hungry and frustrated, Nick tried again. He took a deep breath and peered into the crystal ball. He tried not to focus on how ridiculous his face was reflected in it, but instead gazed inside his mind, kind of like daydreaming, which his teachers always complained he was exceedingly good at doing during class. Suddenly, Nick saw a flash. He jumped, quickly moving his head from left to right as if to shake the images from his mind. He can see, Madame B whispered loudly. Tell us, my little one. Tell us. Nick blinked hard several times. The crystal ball was foggy now, but he could make out a scene. His temples pounded, and for a minute he thought he might throw up. The room felt hot. I see, he squinted. I see a desert. It must be Las Vegas. Never assume, Zajic, the old woman warned. Sand. Lots of sand. It has to be Vegas. And there's the Sphinx. It's Vegas. The Luxor Hotel. Do you see neon? Grandpa asked. Funny. Nick looked hard. I don't. Wait. There's a pyramid. And camels. Grandpa leaned forward. Go ahead, Nick. What else? And there's a man in robes, and around him are men with swords. Grandpa slapped Madame B on the arm. I told you. He beamed. There are birds around him. The men are cutting the birds' heads off with swords. He pressed forward, his nose almost touching the ball. And he's making them come alive again. The man in the robes, it's a trick, an illusion. He's a magician. Nick's head ached, and he fell back against the chair feeling strangely tired. The crystal ball looked like a regular glass ball again. What happened? A wonderful thing. Madame B smiled at him. A most miraculous thing. Our world has been waiting for you, child. You, Nikolai Rostov, have the gift.